금년 들어 오늘이 제일 춥다고 합니다. 영하 11도 4분 생명의 신비상 대상 첫 수상자로서 참석하셔서 이 자리를 빛내주신 호주 시드니이신 광대 성령철 교수님과 서강대 생명문화연 실험대상으로 삼아서 파괴하는 이 죽음의 문화에 맞서고 인간 생명은 아무리 작고 사용될 수 없고 인간 생명에 대한 운명임을 믿고 있습니다. 생명의 오늘 이 상을 받으시는 세 분의 수상자들은 인간 생명 존엄성을 수호하고 전파하는 데 많은 역할을 해주시기를.
참예수님, 제가 몇 년 전에 책을 한 권 읽었습니다. 우리의 몸이 약 60조의 세포로 구성되어 있다고 합니다. 그리고 밑으로 서로 전파돼서 우리가 뜨겁고 차갑고 한 1cm 정도가 될 정도로 얇은 피부막에 들어가면 96,000km 해당되는 혈관 매일 이렇게 펌프질을 한다고 합니다. 그 밖에도 상당히 신비로운 만큼 우리 인간은 굉장히 소중하다는 것을, 인간이 소중한 것을, 인간의 신비는 인간의 육체에만 해당되지 않는 것은 하느님이 사람이 되신 만큼 인간을 사랑하신다는 것을 상받는 존재이기 때문에 인간은 그 누구보다도 소중하다는 것을 접습니다. 모든 인간이 예외 없이 하느님으로부터 사랑받는 소중한 존재라고. 분명히 배아나 태아는 생명입니다. 우리는 세포 덩어리가 아니었습니다. 생명이었습니다.
교황을 소개합니다. 다음으로 서울대교 호주 대사이신 미스터 피터 제이슨 로이 오셨습니다.
Abordees, I offer my heartfelt congratulations to death. In his recent address to the diplomatic corps, the Holy Father Benedict, and he added this comment: the Holy See, for its part, never tires of reaffirming his principles and rights in the image of God. But then he also deplored.
주연님 올라오시고요. 수상자는 상표와 상금이 전달됩니다. 대상 수상자에게는 1억 원, 일반 수상자들에게는 가면 첫 번째 수상자를 모시도록 하겠습니다. 생명과학 분야 포항공과대학교 생명과학과 성영철 교수님입니다. 큰 축하의 박수 보내주십시오. 축배를 낭독하겠습니다. 제2회 생명의 신비상 생명과학 분야 포항공대 성영철 교수. 이 사람은 생명과학 분야의 연구를 통해 인간 생명의 존엄성을 증진시키는 데 기여하였기에 이 상을 수여합니다. 2008년 1월 17일 천주교 서울대교구장 추기경 정진석. 네, 축하합니다. 네, 스태프들은 많이.
감사합니다. 제가 이렇게 명예로운 상을 받게 돼서 굉장히 영광으로 생각합니다. 하지만 아직까지 제가 이룬 업적이 그렇게 많지 않고 실제적으로 난치성 질환 환자에게 직접적인 도움을 아직까지 주지 못한 이런 상황에서 이런 상을 받게 돼서 제가 한편으로는 부끄러운 생각이 듭니다. 그러나 저에게 아마 이런 상을 주신 것은 더욱 열심히 하여서 난치성 질환으로부터 고통받는 수많은 사람들, 그 중에서도 단 한 명의 생명이라도 구원할 수 있는 어떤 혁신적인 새로운 치료 기술을 개발하라는 하나님의 뜻으로 받아들이고 있습니다. 이 자리를 빌어서 제가 연구에 전념할 수 있도록 항상 옆에서 도와주고 적극적으로 지원해준 사랑하는 아내와 제가 실험실에서 대부분 시간을 보내기 때문에 많이 같이 시간을 못 해줬음에도 착하고 건강하게 커진 우리 두 딸 승인이하고 지연이에게 고맙게 생각하고 이런 축복을 주신 하나님께 감사드립니다. 마지막으로 오늘 이 자리가 있기까지 항상 이끌어 주시고
하시겠습니다. 큰 축하의 박수 부탁드립니다. 서강대학교 생명문화연구소는 1991년에 설립되어서 우리나라 생명과학 분야 서강대학교 생명문화연구소 위 기관은 인문과학 분야의 연구를 통해 인간 생명의 존엄성을 증진시키는 데 기여하였기에 이 상을 수여합니다. 2008년 1월 17일 천주교 서울대교구장 추기경 정진석. 네, 축하합니다.
너무 많아서 제가 좀 글로 좀 적어봤습니다. 생명위원회 위원장이신 염수정 주교님, 또 생명의 심의상 심사위원님들께 진심으로 감사를 드립니다. 아울러 저희 연구소를 생명의 신비상 후보에 적극 추천해 주신 서강대학교 손병도 총장님과 석자 교수이신 정의채 모신원님, 그리고 저희 생명문화연구소가 서강대에 설립되는데 크게 기여해 주신 당시 총장이셨던 현재 저희 학교의 이사장이신 박홍 이사장 신부님께 감사를 드립니다. 저희 연구소는 90년대 초반 발생하였던 낙동강 페놀 오염 사건, 또 연이었던 어린이들의 유괴 사건, 또 산업화 민주화 운동 과정에서 발생한 분신 자살들의 반생명적 현상의 심각성을 직시하면서 세상의 생명을 위하여라는 모토 아래 학계, 종교계, 언론계에 많은 원로 인사들이 참석한 가운데 지난 91년도에 발족하였습니다. 저희 연구소는 다 했습니다. 저희 연구소 생명문화활동의 주역은 당연히 저희 연구소에서 좋은 논문을 발표해 주신 연구소의 운영위원회 교수님들과 연구원 조교라고 생각을 합니다. 감사를 드립니다. 심혈하라고 하는 격려의 상으로 받아들여서 앞으로 생명 존엄성 소를 위해서 더욱 정진할 것을 약속드립니다. 감사합니다.
분야의 대상 수상자입니다. 사실 작년에는 대상 수상자가 없었습니다. 작년에 6명의 수상자는 그냥 일반 수상자였는데 올해 처음으로 대상 수상자가 나왔습니다. 네, 대상 수상자 호주 시드니 대교구 교구장이신 조지펠 추기경님을 단상으로 모시겠습니다. 큰 축하의 박수 보내주십시오. 네, 추기경님은 많은 저술과 강론을 통해서 생명 수호에 앞장섰을 뿐만 아니라 실제적으로 자신이 담당하고 있는 멜버른 교구에 요한 바오로 2세 대학을 설립하여서 생명 가족 프리 Field of Social Action awarded to His Eminence George Cardinal Pell. We are proud to present the Mystery of Life Award 2008 to Your Eminence for your contribution to promotion of the dignity of human life. January 17, 2008. Nicholas Cardinal 정진석 Archbishop of Seoul. 예, 큰 축하의 박수 부탁드립니다.
Cardinal Chung and friends all. I come from a distant land and from a very different culture. And it is a great honour for me on behalf of the Sydney Archdiocese to receive this Grand Prix Mysterium Vitae award. So although I come from a distant land and a different culture, we are united as brothers and sisters in our love of humanity. We are united as children of God and united as defenders of human life. Certainly this unexpected honour will encourage me to do what I can to intensify our efforts to defend human life and to explain in good human terms the benefits that come from a Christian understanding of human life. I hope this award will enable us to do even greater things in the future. I think that the Seoul Archdiocese now, in terms of its symbolic and practical support for human life, is one of the leaders in the Catholic world. I cannot think of another archdiocese, Catholic archdiocese or Protestant diocese throughout the world who is doing more practically and symbolically in the defence of human life. So I congratulate the Cardinal, I congratulate the Archdiocese, and I thank you very much for this immense honour.
네, 다시 한번 축하의 박수 부탁드립니다. 네, 이제 마지막으로
오늘 생명의 신비상 수상하신 분들께 다시 한번 진심으로 축하드립니다. 그리고 하느님께서 우리 교구에서 이 생명의 신비상을 제정하고 운영할 수 있도록 이끌어 주심에 대해서 하느님께 감사드립니다. 그리고 이 생명의 신비상을 이렇게 장엄한 예식으로 집행할 수 있도록 이 자리를 빛내주신 모든 참석자 여러분들께 감사드립니다. 이제 우리 귀중한 업적에 대해서 강연 말씀을 들으실 준비로 여러분들이 끝까지 참석해 주시기를 간곡히 부탁드립니다. 고맙습니다.
네, 감사합니다.
The Chung, His Excellency the Apostolic Nuncio, Archbishop Cherry, the brother bishops, especially Bishop Cho and the Committee for Life, the Australian Ambassador, His Excellency Peter Rowe, the distinguished academics, fathers, sisters and friends all. In Australia, like Korea, we have a significant development in the whole area of stem cell research, for good and for ill. And certainly one of the tasks I hope that myself and my committee will commit ourselves to when we return is to try to strengthen the links between the Catholic activities, scientific and other, for life here, especially in the Archdiocese of Seoul, with the Catholic activities in Australia, and not just Catholic activities, but in the secular world of the universities and research facilities. So I omitted to mention that before. I have mentioned it on some other occasions, but I publicly commit ourselves to working for that. There's deep confusion today about the place and the value of the human person in the world. Our concern for the physical ecology of the world is not always matched by a similar concern for the moral ecology of our societies. So much so that an associate professor of obstetric medicine recently wrote a letter to the Medical Journal of Australia in which he described having children as greenhouse unfriendly behaviour. He recommended that every family choosing to have more than 2 children should be charged a tax to fund the planting and tending of 4 hectares of trees to offset the carbon cost of each child. Under his proposal, parents would be charged a carbon tax, while family planning clinics and hospitals could attract carbon credits by providing greenhouse-friendly services such as hormonal contraceptives, intrauterine devices, diaphragms, condoms, and sterilisation procedures. I'm not sure what is more extraordinary, that an obstetrician could hold such views, or that a respected medical journal would publish such views. But either way, this is a striking illustration of where a minority, anti-human mentality wants to take us. I'm not suggesting that the size of our carbon footprint is of no significance. Pope Benedict XVI, in his message for the World Day of Peace at the beginning of this year, reminds us that the earth is the home of the human family, entrusted to men and to women to be protected and cultivated with responsible freedom, not just for today, but also for tomorrow. However, that respecting the environment, he also pointed out, doesn't mean considering material or animal nature more important than the human person. He says that humanity today is rightly concerned about the ecological balance of tomorrow. And he said we have to work without ideology, try to get the best point of view possible, with the aim of reaching agreement on a model of sustainable development capable of ensuring the well-being of all while respecting environmental balances. Extreme environmental proposals are often expressions of modern society's deep confusion about the place and the value of the human person in the world, and that should set off warning bells for us. If we have learned anything from the atrocities of the last century, the 20th century, it is that wide-scale attacks upon human life and dignity both stem from and sustain reductive understandings of the human person. As Pope John Paul II explained in his great encyclical on life issues, Evangelium Vitae, the Gospel of Life, the root cause of many and varied human rights abuses which afflict our world today is contemporary man's inability to see himself as mysteriously different, and indeed superior, different from other earthly creatures. To grasp the transcendent character of his existence as man, and to consider life as a splendid gift of God, something sacred, entrusted to his responsibility, and thus also to his loving care and veneration. Like the Hebrew psalmist, but today we're much more aware of the boundless immensity of the universe and its unsolved mysteries. Are there, for example, or are there not, black holes? Contemporary searchers might still exclaim with the psalmist, "When I look at your heavens, the work of your hands, the moon and the stars that you have established. What are human beings that you are mindful of them, mortals that you care for them?" But too few of us hear the answer of the psalmist. "Yet you have made them a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honor." That is us, that's human beings. Sadly, we're more likely to see ourselves as radically independent and self-determining demigods, or alternatively as purely material, herded and determined animals. And we're at our worst when we pick and choose from both of these conceptions of the human person, making godlike choices which presume we can program life and death, and enacting them like animals, with little regard for the freedom and dignity of others, where the strong take what they can. The moral and social ecology of the earth also calls for urgent attention. Crimes against life have always, of course, been a part of human society. Like war, abortion, infanticide, homicide, suicide, and euthanasia all have a long history. 2,000 years ago, for example, the exposure of unwanted female infants and deformed male infants was legal, morally accepted, and widely practiced throughout the Greco-Roman world. Far more babies were born than were allowed to live. And the greatest philosophers of the Greco-Roman tradition, Plato and Aristotle, both recommended infanticide as legitimate state policy. There was also frequent recourse to abortion, with Roman law according the male head of the family the right to order a woman in the household to abort, and the weight of Greek philosophy fully supported such views. Tragically, a similar program of attacks against human life, both in its earliest and final stages, can be found around the world today. And the examples are only too easy to find. There are approximately 45 million abortions performed around the world each year. 45 million, an immense number. The practice of aborting female fetuses because of a preference for sons is becoming widespread, and I took the example of India. UNICEF reports that there's an estimated 7,000 fewer girls born every day in India because of the spread of cheap prenatal sex determination technology and the easy availability of abortion. Another troubling trend is that gender-based abortion is accelerating in the more developed, richer regions of India. For example, in the prosperous northern state of the Punjab and in the neighbouring state of Haryana. There are now 823 girls per 1,000 boys. It's declined from the years just in front of it. If we go to Europe, we find here and there similar patterns of abortion, especially in the ex-communist world. But in Netherlands and Belgium, we also find the practice of government-sponsored euthanasia. So I'll omit all those details and just conclude on page 4, the fourth paragraph, so that in 2005 there were approximately 12,660 intentionally caused deaths under medical supervision, comprising 9.3% of all deaths in the Netherlands this year. So the euthanasia, and often unrequested euthanasia, is a regular occurrence in that world. Making life. Where anti-life practices once largely involved the taking of human life, today they may also involve the making of human life. A new concern for the pro-life movement is the development and expansion of new crimes against human life and dignity within the area of reproductive technology. In the 60s, many became better able to have sex without babies. Today, a growing minority want to have babies without sex. The new reproductive technologies have expanded the means by which we can create human life. Sexual intercourse is no longer necessary. Increasingly for some, this is an old-fashioned, haphazard, even unhygienic way to conceive. Today, the rich have many more options, ranging from artificial insemination from a donor to in vitro fertilization, and perhaps in the future, cloning to produce children, so-called reproductive cloning, perhaps. Since Louise Brown's in vitro fertilization, conception and birth over 25 years ago, I think it was in England, more than 3 million children have been conceived with the aid of new reproductive technologies. And I know that I have confirmed one or two of these children over the years because I've been introduced to them. But as well as engendering new human life, the new reproductive technologies also have the capacity to engender a loss of respect for the meaning and value of human procreation, human life, and the natural family. Certainly the 10 to 15% of couples who have difficulties conceiving a child usually experience great anguish. Longing for a child of one's own is a natural and deep-seated desire for something which is very good. And in fact, the use of technology to overcome fertility problems is not wrong in itself. Reproductive medicine and technology have the potential for great good as well as harm. So too, even if the manner in which human conception is achieved cannot always be approved, every child who comes into the world must be accepted as a gift and brought up with love. As well as giving life, reproductive technologies often involve a willingness to expend human life. By attempting to maximize the rates of live births, excess embryos may be produced and then frozen, discarded, or experimented upon. Embryos are often screened before transfer to a woman's womb and discarded if they don't pass certain quality controls. Even if they are transferred, they may still be aborted if they don't pass further tests, or in the case of multiple pregnancies, if they impose a risk to the safe birth of the other babies. From the analysis of data coming out of Victoria, one of the Australian states, which hosts some of the leading IVF centres in the world, it appears that the overall survival rate of IVF embryos is around only 3.5%. New ways of making life can also fail to respect the intrinsic meaning and value of human love and procreation. When technology doesn't merely assist sexual intercourse to be procreative, but actually replaces the need for intercourse, children become the product of our wills and third-party intervention, rather than the fruit of a profoundly personal act of love between a man and a woman. However much they will be loved by their parents, these children don't come into being as an equal third party to their love, but as an object of scientific technology. Increasingly too, reproductive technology results in children who begin life with a single parent, or a combination of different genetic gestational parents or social parents, thereby risking confusion of normal family ties, roles and responsibilities, and, of course, self-image. The new reproductive technologies have the capacity to radically alter our understanding and experience of childbearing and child-rearing, loving and nurturing, marriage and family. Some academics and ordinary people are already clamouring for the right to a custom-made child. For example, one bioethicist has argued, and I quote, "The right to a custom-made child is merely the natural extension of our current discourse on reproductive rights. There's no virtue in the role of chance in conception and great virtue in expanding choice. Embryos and fetuses are biological property, and parents should be allowed to modify or terminate them as they see fit within broad social constraints. If women are to be allowed the reproductive right or choice to choose the father of their child with his attendant characteristics, then they should also be allowed the right to choose the characteristics from a catalogue." More than human. Not content to control and master human life at its origin and end, we're now tempted to take we're tempted to try to remake human life. As scientific and medical prospects for enhancement of human physical and intellectual powers increase, some people are proposing and advocating a new phase of technologically driven human evolution, which they've dubbed post-humanism. Keeping human life human could be the next struggle for the pro-life movement. As Leon Cass, the former chairman of the President's Council on Bioethics in the United States, has observed, in our lifetime, the natural relations between sex and procreation, personal identity and embodiment, and human agency and human achievement have all been profoundly altered by new biomedical procedures. The pill, in vitro fertilization, surrogate wombs, cloning, genetic engineering, organ swapping, mechanical spare parts, performance-enhancing drugs, computer implants into the brains, Ritalin for the young, Viagra for the old, Prozac for everyone. Virtually unnoticed, the train to Huxley's dehumanized, brave new world has already left the station. The centrality of truth. How can we convince others to promote and defend the intrinsic value of human life? Earlier, I mentioned the high rates of state-sanctioned abortion and infanticide in the ancient Greco-Roman world. I didn't mention the small grouping of people who, from the moment that they formed, refused in that society to participate in those practices. Indeed, the historian Rodney Stark records how by the end of the 2nd century, those people who were by now known as Christians were not only proclaiming their rejection of abortion and infanticide, but had begun to confront pagans and pagan religions for sustaining these crimes. Rodney Stark argues that the relatively superior fertility of the Christian population was one of the reasons for the rise of Christianity within a society that was otherwise intent on contracepting and killing itself and its future. As we know, after hundreds of years of struggle, the sanctity of life ethic embraced by Christianity had become one of the foundations of Western civilization. Can this sanctity of life ethic be embraced widely once again? Could groupings of pro-life people, Christians, other religions, no religion, creative minorities in the language Pope Benedict, following Arnold Toynbee, has suggested to us, could these creative minorities once again advance sound principle arguments about the value and inviolability of human life within the academy, the legal and political arena, and society more generally? Now, it can be tempting, of course, to think that this is too hard, especially in the face of the many isms which pervade contemporary ethical discourse and practice. Lacking a common philosophical framework, and sometimes even any coherent framework, it seems as though it's becoming increasingly difficult for educated Westerners to perceive truth and accept it. The flight from truth takes many forms, and young people can find the search for truth among the competing alternatives too difficult, especially when they're not equipped either religiously or conceptually even to begin. The important value of tolerance can degenerate into indifferentism, where anything goes in an individual's private life, provided it is freely chosen, to be counterbalanced in the public sphere by hostility towards any irreverence or questioning of the fashionable standards of political correctness. In Catholic circles in Australia, one form of the escape from truth in activities touching on sexuality and life is the appeal to the primacy of conscience. At a broader and deeper level, we have the hostility to the concept of truth among the deconstructionists, the postmodernists. In the 1930s in Weimar Germany and in the 1940s in Nazi-occupied Europe, many intellectuals such as the philosopher Martin Heidegger, the jurist and philosopher Carl Schmitt, and the literary theorist Paul de Man, supported pro-Nazi and anti-Semitic policies. The German novelist Bernhard Schlink has used de Man, who introduced the theory of deconstruction to the United States, as the model for the intellectual figure in his new novel, Homecomings, where the central theme is, and I quote, "What we take for reality is merely a text, and what we take for texts merely interpretations. Reality and texts are therefore what we make of them." The origins of deconstruction are compromised and tainted, with one writer claiming in 1988 that the man's life story is grounds for viewing the whole of deconstruction as a vast amnesty project for the politics of collaboration during World War II. Fundamental to our struggle for life is the recognition of truth with its constraints and disciplines which are essential to human flourishing. And I recommend that you read that passage from Pope Benedict in his New Year message of peace. And why it has been accorded an important place in all healthy societies. Until relatively recently, marriage and the family as a social norm has been understood as one man and one woman committed for life, to the exclusion of all other partners, along with they're committed also with the children of that union. This has not meant that single parents cannot form a family, or that the adoption of children isn't a good thing for both generally at any rate, for their adopted parents and the children concerned. All social groups have traditionally accepted the value of having two parents who are biologically connected to their child and who are committed to one another. But when we attempt to socially engineer new social norms in a misguided attempt to be non-discriminatory, we profoundly alter society for all concerned. A case in point involves the so-called socially infertile, that is, those who are unable to conceive because they are single or choose only to engage in sexual acts with a person of the same sex. In a growing number of cases, new biotechnologies are enlisted to give these same-sex couples or individuals what they want, a child. This changes the nature of the relationship between parents and children for everyone. Children are no longer seen principally as gifts in their own right, but primarily as commodities to satisfy adult wants. Social norms concerning marriage and the family have traditionally accepted the premise that children warrant protection and that society has an obligation to act in their interests. But giving the social equivalence of marriage to same-sex relationships dramatically challenges several social norms. It says that there is no right of a child to be known and raised by their biological mother and father. Rejecting the traditional understanding of marriage and family says that intergenerational biological connectivity doesn't matter for children. In the case of socially infertile women, it says that having a father is an unnecessary duplication. Allowing two men to adopt a child rejects timeless wisdom and says that fathers can mother as well as women. When a child becomes a project to satisfy adult wants, the fundamental right of a child to know their biological siblings can be ignored. And so when social norms change, their effects can be felt or are felt by everybody. This is not to say that our efforts to encourage good moral reflection about life issues should focus exclusively on the presentation of principled moral arguments and always begin with the consideration of objective moral principles and norms. We should remember that people are often more moved by their heartstrings than by their head. Renewing life and wonder. This fact is certainly not lost, that's the importance of the heart, on proponents of destructive embryo research, who continue to advance their case through the mouths of young children with insulin-dependent diabetes, or former high-profile athletes who've been tragically struck down by paraplegia. A 5-year-old human embryo in a petri dish usually has little chance of evoking the same degree of sympathy as people with incurable illnesses or disabilities. But these sorts of emotive arguments can also work in our favour. There are other deep emotions and intuitions, such as wonder and awe, which can draw people towards a pro-life perspective. I'm encouraged by the work of the Japanese scientist Shinya Yamanaka, which involves the reprogramming of human skin cells back to pluripotent stem cells. These cells have all the therapeutic and research potential of pluripotent stem cells derived from human embryos, without any of the ethical problems associated with the cloning and killing of human embryos. But what interested me most about Dr. Yamanaka was the revelation that it was ethical qualms about destructive embryo research that moved him to work on reprogramming and how these developed in the first place. In an interview with the New York Times, Dr. Yamanaka, a father of 2, recalled a day 8 years ago in EBF clinic, and I quote, "When I saw the embryo," he said, "I suddenly realized there was such a small difference between it and my daughters. I thought, we can't keep destroying embryos for our research. There must be another way." There were, of course, many differences between this several-day-old human embryo and Yamanaka's daughters in terms of its maturity, size, appearance, and capacities. Yet his knowledge and awe of the embryo's intrinsic potential for human growth and development allowed him to recognize the essential similarity between them, their common humanity and shared dignity. Yamanaka's breakthrough is, amongst other things, the fruit of the virtue of reverence. This example reminds us that while morally upright principles are indispensable, it's impossible to apply them in a vacuum. As the Lutheran bioethicist Gilbert Meilander writes, how we understand such principles and how we understand the situations we encounter will depend on the background beliefs that we bring to moral reflections. Beliefs about the meaning of human life, the significance of suffering and dying, and the ultimate context in which we understand our being and doing. These views, he says, are commonly acquired not so much by reasoned argument and reflection, but imbibed from the surrounding culture. Sadly, the modern discipline of bioethics usually has very little to say about these deeper questions. Leon Kass, whom I quoted before, former president of the US Presidential Committee on Bioethics, points out that while bioethics has become overly rational, abstract, procedural and ideologically, with regard to the deeper matters and ultimate human concerns that lie just below the surface of everyday life, the significance of human finitude, or the moral worth of suffering, or the meaning of sexuality and procreation, it has virtually nothing to say. But the role of the great religious traditions is very important here, and especially in helping others to develop what Pope John Paul II described as a contemplative outlook. He said we need, first of all, to foster in ourselves and others a contemplative outlook, that arises from faith in the God of life who has created every individual as a wonder. It's the outlook of those who see life in its deeper meaning, who grasp its utter gratuitousness, its beauty, and its invitation to freedom and responsibility. It's the outlook of those who don't presume to take possession of reality, but instead accept it as a gift, discovering in all things the reflection of the Creator and seeing in every person his living image. This outlook doesn't give in to discouragement when confronted by those who are sick, suffering, outcast, or at death's door. Instead, in all these situations, it feels challenged to find meaning. And precisely in these circumstances, it's open to perceiving in the face of every person a call to encounter, dialogue, and solidarity. Therefore, a primary task for the pro-life movement is to draw society into a deeper reflection about the mystery, wonder, and value of human life. We need to promote an alternative to the technological outlook which seeks to control and manipulate birth and death, to reduce nature to matter, to elevate having over being, to depersonalize the body and sexuality, and to replace the criterion of personal dignity with the criterion of efficiency, functionality, and usefulness. Our task is to call our brothers and sisters' hearts and minds to wonder and awe. Thank you very much.
네, 우리 생명수호운동의
말씀하셨듯이 난치성 질환 치료를 위한 새로운 혁신적인 기술에 대해서 소개드리겠습니다. 예를 드릴까 합니다. 잘 아시다시피 난치성 질환 중에서도 이 감염 질환으로 대표적인 것이 에이즈, 전 세계적으로 에이즈만 해도 한 4천만 명, 비형 감염은 3억 5천. 심각한 것은 약을 투여를 중단했을 때 다시 이 비형. 그래서 실질적으로 현재에 사용되고 있는 이러한 약들은 대부분의 비형 간염 만성 더욱 지금 쓰여지고 있는 인터페론 알파나 항요법제보다도 더욱 좋은 새로운 치료제의 개발이 심각한 실정이라는 것이 공감대를 형성하고 있습니다. 저는 새로운 치료제로서 기존의 항요법제나 또는 인터페론보다는 새로운 방어 면역 시스템을 이용해서 이러한 난치성 질환을 치료하는데 흥미를 갖고 이런 감염성 질환을 예방하는데 아주 효과적이라는 것이 이미 증명된 바가 있었고요. 그 다음에 이러한 우리 생체 방어 면역 시스템은 때문에 그 자체로서도 사용될 수 있고 서로 다른 작용 메커니즘 때문에 병용요법을 통해서 이러한 메모리 세포를 우리가 효과적으로 유도해 놓으면 우리 몸에 있는 이러한 방어 면역 시스템을 이렇게 부스팅하는 방법에는 여러 가지 전략들이 있습니다. 백신으로서 일반적으로 우리가 얘기하는 백신은 대부분 질병을 예방하는 를 다른 백신에 비해서 더 효과적으로 유도할 수 있는 장점이 있기 때문에 치료 백신으로서 적절하다고 생각해 왔습니다. 그래서 이러한 발한 기술을 이용하여서 이런 항원을 높이거나 또는 이 백신인 HB110을 개발하게 됐습니다. 우리가 실험실에서 이런 새로운 물질, 신약 후보 물질을 개발하게 되면은 이러한 후보 물질 모델에서 이러한 신형이 효능이 있는가를 확인해야 되고요. 그 다음에는 이러한 물질이 정말 안전한가, 무엇보다도 사람